Now we're going to start this little demonstration here. I'm going to prepare it beforehand. I had a choice between these two photographs. That one's rather a nice one. It would have been interesting to do the foreground on the apron and dress there. And I could also show different techniques in this. I'm going to use masking fluid around this area and deliberately leave those out to put this back in with pastel afterwards. So we're going to use acrylic inks to get this wet into wet and these little bright colours going on here and a wet into wet background, and then rub off the masking fluid once it's dry and then draw into this with the pastels using water and just the soft pastel afterwards to show how rapidly and vibrantly we can make this work. So first of all I need to draw this out on the paper. The paper I'm going to use this time is 140 pound Arches hot pressed, so a nice smooth surface, as I don't want a textured surface. If I was doing snow or something like that, then I'd want a rough paper, but in this case I just want the hot press paper and a little bit more detail and the smooth surface. And here's our finished drawing. That's all we need just to do this piece of work. Now I need to put on some masking fluid. I'm going to mask just this area here and one or two of these little flowers coming in. Maybe this little white one here as well on the far side. I'm not going to do these here because I'm going to put those in with pastel afterwards. But it's these ones I'm going to mask because I want to pick the very dark ink against these. And then when I remove the masking fluid, the dark will show up and I can just glaze over the little lighter light blue acrylic and so on, green. Then I can pick out the pastel colours afterwards across all of these wet into wet darks I'm going to do. So all of this wet into wet, masking fluid here. Now I'm going to show you that, and then we'll do the pastel at the very end. Now the masking fluid I use is put it on with a rubber clay modelling tool, which is quite useful for this sort of. You need the clay shaper to do the masking fluid. You can see I've got quite a nice shape there with a sharp edge and a rounded edge. I should need an oval mop for the actual paintwork and a small round, and that in the way of tools apart from the pastels should be about all I require. So let's put on this masking fluid first. It's a grey drawing gun, Pabio, and all I want to do, put all these little petal shapes in. Take a little bit of time, but it'll save so much work later. So here we just come outwards with the clay shaper, making all these white petals with the end of the clay shaper. And of course leaving the centres covered as well, because that wants to be yellow later. So we'll do those centres as well. Just drag it outwards. There's no point in me showing you my doing all of this, is there? These spiky edges. You can see we soon work this up. Right, that will do for the basics, to leave the white behind. We can put more in afterwards with the white chalk, both up here and here. And that's the drawing prepared, ready for the demonstration. Next I shall need an oval mop, a small round, and of course my acrylic inks, which I shall mix with water and use very light watercolours wet into wet you'll see in the demonstration. Acrylic inks very different to acrylic paints, much thinner and more translucent. Then the Unison pastels, handmade in Yorkshire. Here's my suggested collection, my suggested selection. First the whole list, and then I'll show you the individual sheets. Wonderful pastels, very soft and very high quality, therefore you can mix them with water or blend them with water afterwards. But also I shall need some very bright pastels, and they're usually the much cheaper ones, such as Inscribe.
I have. I've done things that
I do like it. Oh, I don't know whether I want to know that.
It's good.
Oh, achy.
Oh, I know the feeling.
Right, so pretty strong colours, and you might think, wow, what's he doing? But I've done these, like when I was working at Burton Agnes, I've done work like this very, very loosely before, and people have come past and you can hear you know, and it just looks like a total mess. And then they come back half an hour later and, is that the same painting? You know, it just pulls it together. So we start loose and we finish tight. If we start tight, I don't mean tight as in, you know, too much to drink. But if we start loose, we can get tighter and tighter. And you're the people in control. This is the beauty of it. So we work up loosely like this at first with underpainting. Just want to wash on here at the minute, just thinly, just to get these colours going. I wouldn't worry too much. And each painting is different. And you know, the thing is, I get bored. The same as you guys do. I will get bored, and I don't want to be painting the same thing over and over again. So when I come and do a demo, I always try and do something that I haven't done quite the same as before. Now, you know, you see I'm doing that as a graduated wash. It's gone from darker to lighter, but you get a hard edge like that because this ink dries so quickly. It's still just wet enough look to blend there. I'm going to put a little bit of green. I think she finishes right there. Down a bit longer down to there. Now, while that's still wet, let's look at the slightly stronger blues. And drop in stronger here and there. Much darker, but even a bit of green into that. And you think, oh, if there's not green in the hair, surely, but you'd be quite surprised how many colours are reflecting in something like this. I'm going to go quite dark on the hair, all the way down to there, and to here. Because I'm going to bring these lights back over it with the pastels later afterwards. It's oval mops, you can do what I'm doing now, you can use them sideways on. And I'm also, I hope the drawing's right, because I'm actually painting at an angle here, so I'm seeing it in foreshortened form. And this is something you've got to be careful when you're drawing something out. Be careful if you're drawing it at an angle, because if it's in foreshortened form, it's going to be longer than it should actually be. I'm going to take some of the lemon yellow, it's coming down here, sunlight coming down through there, into these areas here, there's a bit of light. And I'm not going to paint every leaf exactly, I'm just going to get the feeling of this thing. Here we go, painting all these lighter colours in the background. Right, back up to here. The green showing around the hand there. The green up into there. Back of the hair here. Mould it round. But don't worry about it. Remember, you haven't got to be exact by any means. Much more cool going on here. To here. And just indicate those leaves, so I'm painting the darks in between as a watercolour technique and leaving some of the lights showing a bit, just highlights. It's all cooler there. And these are forming the little stems that are going to go in between the daisies there. Those white daisies are going to be rubbed off. We're going to get little bits of light green and dark of this against the light daisies showing out. Then it comes down to here, and there's totally dark shadow coming down. We've got deep green shadow coming down to there. Maybe you can just start to see what I'm doing now, just beginning to come together, yeah?
No, but I understand what you were trying to tell me, and I'd be too frightened to do that.
You've got to take a risk, and it's only materials. I mean, you can chuck a bit of paperwork at the
As
end.
Rose said, it's only a piece of paper,
Yeah,
which was a good...
absolutely, and we can come back onto it with pastel. I mean, even if you go wrong, you can come back with the pastel, and there's lighter areas there, and go across it and make it right with the pastel, can't you see? Really deep, going into here, greens. Those cools against the warms. So I'm playing the cool against the warm, the rough against the smooth, the light against the dark. Questions you've got to ask, don't be afraid, just say, because they're not going to offend me. Don't worry. Right, that is about enough for my wet into wet background. I think some of you who worked this way before will see what I'm up to. You see I've just established my darks and the paint's just, you can see it's still a bit cockled, although I've stretched this paper, so you don't always have to stretch paper, by the way. The heavier the paper, then the less need there is to stretch it. But obviously when I'm working on something like this quickly, it's better that it stretches out as quickly as I can. And if I just, now you can use your fingers, or you can use a cloth. It actually, in some ways, is easier to use a cloth, because it comes off more easily.
I used to, yeah.
Finger painting.
Yeah. And because it's slightly wet, I'm getting a slight smearing, but I don't mind because some of those daisies are going to be taken down later with a little bit of colour anyway. Right, so that's all the masking fluid I put on. There's no more, but just to give you an idea how the lights shine out against the dark. So it's quite effective, isn't it? Now, you see on the photograph, some of these ones down here are slightly more in shadow, some of them are in shadow. There's two ways I can do that. I can either come in with a colour and just darken them down slightly, look. So it's,
Using pastels.
so I can use the pastel if I want, just to give a bit of shadow in them, like that. Or I could have used a little bit of the ink again, couldn't I? And just glazed in. So what I want to do now is get a little bit of this shadow going underneath some of the flowers, like that. Not all of them are going to be pure white. Just little touches, look, just the tip of it, where the shadows are, just to give me some form. And it starts to push them back a bit. There's hardly ever pure white or pure black in a picture, is there? Because there's going to be light. If there's pink light from above or there's yellow light from the sun, whites are going to be cream, and there's no such thing as black. If you now, just as a little experiment, just close your eyes, and then look at the black, the darkness. Now put your hands over your eyes. Just try that. And you've got two different blacks. So what was black? Dark black is the total absence of light. But while we've got light and we can see something, how can it be black? This is the impressionist way of thinking anyway. And white, how can it be white? Because there must be light shining on something. There's always going to be pure colours. So you paint using light colours or dark colours until you can't go any lighter or darker, and then at the very last resort you may have to use pure white. But in watercolour a little bit different, because we tend in watercolour to deliberately leave little bits of white showing in the painting to give a sparkle. Right, so that's that bit. And I'm going to put a little bit of a warmer blue as well into some of these. Warmth. Surprising, but amongst these daisies, some of it's going to be a little bit warmer. Look at that lovely, how that lovely blue works there, look. And it gives you a vibrance, doesn't it? So I'm playing warm against cools again. Now the yellow daisies, they're not just bright yellow. The ones that are in shadow have a slightly darker middle to them. So this is yellow ochre I'm using now, which is a darker, warmer yellow. And the ones that are in the light are much stronger, so they will have a much brighter yellow. And now we start to get sunlight, and sunlight we can create not only by colour, but by tone. So we can have, if there's strong sunlight, much darker lights and darks, yeah? If it's a duller day like today, everything's flatter, and that's when I hate painting. This is when I hate Lincolnshire, when it's flat and grey and horrible. Got that. Now let's start to work up these lighter ones up here. I'm going to take some white here, and I'm going to start to work up these little bits of pastel over the top. So we've seen how we did it by leaving the masking fluid. Now I'm going to start little dots and dashes, making up my daisies going back to here, showing between the grasses, right down to here, into there. Get that cream on here as well then, so that it links together. And that gives us that roundness. An important part, the figure, let me come back up to her hair, and then take that yellow ochre again, and start off with that. I might have to come slightly in front now because I've got to see what I'm doing, so forgive me, I won't be long in front. I'm just going to get round here a bit to see what I'm doing. Right, like that. We'll just bring the sunlight, just indicate that sunlight coming round ahead, using the tip of the pastel. Now, that's scumbling, this is feathering with little strokes, okay? So I'm just scumbling the edge of the pastel over the top, just to get that glow going here. Slightly pinker on that ear. Push the colours, look for colours, just gently bringing in these tones, letting that colour underneath glow through. Then we can start on the dress, let the light hit the dress there, the reflected light down there, on the top of the flower here. We want those daisies in here. Can't see what it's looking. I am working very close up. Now if I was working normally, I'd want to get back from this picture a bit to be able to see what I'm doing. Let me just act it right here. Now, if I were working at home, I would need to be having like a fencing match.
I don't
I'd be
know how you're doing
back
it
here and
from the
going in.
side.
It's almost very, I can do the basics, but something as detailed as this, because it's in
Yes.
perspective, I can't see. So I've got to come here just to get this bit right. I want this effect of this gold light shining down. So I can use that same colour behind and just scumble in, just over the surface, look, start to bring this light in like this. Just by, I think one of the ways I'm talking about here is, it's like a jigsaw technique, where you can say, put the right colours in the right places, in the right shapes, relevant one to another. Doesn't matter how complicated the picture is, it will gradually just come together like a jigsaw. So when you set these really complicated compositions of a street scene or something, don't worry about it. Treat the whole thing in the same way. Don't treat the horse differently to the background, or the dog with the person differently. Treat it all in the same way, abstractly, and it will just come together. So if I can gradually get these marks right here for her face, gradually, and hopefully her face will just appear. And the flowers that are coming in front, we talked about these here. I could have put them in earlier, but let's have a go now and see how beautifully these pastels will show over the top. So it comes down through here, we've got then this lovely, look at the way that colour stands out there. We can really go vibrant with the pastels afterwards, look. Really enjoy it, and we want this little vibrance of colour.
If you'd had a new model, you'd have filled the place.
Well, you're offering.
Not that you'd want to pay. Pay for whatever you fill the place.
For the demonstration's sake, I've probably almost shown you enough, haven't I? Because you can see now how it can work. We've gone from loose, we can tighten up, we can work into these colours are glowing through. I can work over and over again as much as I want to gradually bring this forward.
Yeah.
Just gradually building it up. Softening some of these edges. Textures. Rough against smooth, light against dark. Get the feeling of these plant stems. I'm not being exact, I'm just making an approximate pattern and shape, but my marks that I am making are very much about what is there. Now, it's up to you how far you take it, isn't it? We could just keep going and going. For me, the effect of light is almost there. I don't want to do too much more, really. Because it's got that looseness and light, it's just an impression as if we're glimpsing over through the sunlight, and there she is. A bit more. Well, last time I asked what people wanted, and this is what they asked me to do. So if you do want me back, you need to decide now, first, that you'll be here, so it's worth my coming, and secondly, what is it you'd like? And I'll come and demonstrate anything, whether it's portrait or seascape, or you see what to do.
To do people portrait in pastel.
In pastel, right? It's a challenge, isn't it? You keep your clothes on.
Yeah, I only want it head and shoulders.
So do you always paint from a photograph?
I prefer to paint from life. The big ones I'm doing now in that church, I'm actually in there with the dog lying beside me snoring, painting on a huge, much nicer to work from life. But with something like this, it's very difficult. I mean, I've got some paintings at home where my partner or friends have done modelling. But it's very, you're out in the plein air, weather conditions, whether the model can stand too long. I mean, I did one of her painted in Provence in the poppy field, and again, a couple of hours of standing in poppy fields. We had to have quite a long break a while because it almost flaked out with the sunshine, even with the straw hat and stuff.
Wouldn't you take a photograph?
Half an hour left today. I don't know how things are going to go.
Doing well in that short time.
I don't really want to go too far with it because I think I'll make it. I don't want to tighten up too much; it'll become an illustration.
This is an art to know when to finish, isn't
That's
it? As well?
yeah, that's it. It's some of the watercolour too.
Keep going. You do, don't you?
And then you spoil it. don't
Yeah.
you?
Yes, you do.
That's right.
Overwork it. We're all guilty of it, though. We all do it, don't we? Do we? Oh, that's good then.
Well, I think we do, don't
Yes,
we?
we all make the same mistakes. I mean, you know, the times I've wanted to throw a painting over my shoulder and I've had to force my way through it. And there's one, it's not on video, I take the outtakes out, but in Scotland there when I was painting an acrylic of Drover's Bridge, I threw it over my shoulder and split the canvas, I had to go get another canvas. It doesn't happen often, but just occasionally, midges and rain and but it happens to all of us. So you've just got to work through it, you really have. And most paintings can be pulled back, even if they are wrong. You've got to realise that, but most of them you can work on. Bring them back. You can, if you're doing a portrait, it's got to be right. I think the techniques of oil painting and acrylics are so loose that I can work up a portrait fairly easily. I should be able to with pastel. But again, there's so many ways you could go at it, isn't there? Again, I could go at it with the traditional block and blending, so we can just have a piece of Ongres paper there, and I can block in the basic midtones and then just put the highlights in, which is probably the way I'll do it, because I can work up the highlights at the end, so I get my basic drawing done first and then bring it into the person towards the end, is the traditional, easiest way. That's the Old English method. Right, so that will do, just showing you the loose way of painting today.